Welcome to the Samueletini Show, where business, innovation, and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode. Today, we are going to discuss an intersection, emerging market, private sector, partnership, and engagement, and how, companies, NGOs, development corporate, they can work together to really change lives in what we call here at the show the future market, because they already emerged. And we do it today with somebody that has been on the continent and everywhere in the world for more than 20 years, working with the best names ever. So I'm very pleased to have today a senior advisor for private sector engagement and partnership. So, and welcome to the show, Todd Kirkbride, here today on the show. Thank you so much, Todd, for being here with us today.
Great pleasure. Thanks for having me along, and nice to meet you today.
Todd, your CV is impressive. The first time we met, like USAID, TechnoServe, the others, you have been all over the continent. You have made deals. You have transformed lives. But before that, we only want to know the first question we ask every guest. So, how you have started your career, how you have started your journey, and how you have moved into this world?
Samuel, thanks so much for the question, and happy to be here again today. So I've been working in international development since I earned my MBA at Thunderbird School of Global Management way back in 2002. And when I got the degree, my initial work was around providing technical support to small and medium enterprises and economic growth projects, as well as providing marketing and business development leadership, mostly around USAID-funded programs. So around 2007, I applied for a senior partnership advisor position with USAID. And as folks might suspect, it takes quite a bit of time to go through the formal processes of getting hired. I literally had forgotten I had applied for the position until 1 year later, while on my honeymoon, checking in at an internet cafe, I got an official job offer to join this department back in Washington, D.C. So we hurried home from our vacation, packed our stuff, and we moved to the United States so I could work in the Office of Development Partnerships. So this is really where I started to learn the practice and the fundamentals around public-private partnerships. However, my original career was in the private sector, first as an advertising and a marketing executive. And so I fundamentally believed in the power of markets and capitalism and really wanted to work at the nexus with international aid and development and to help ensure that companies were doing well by doing good. So in other words, combining profits and social impact. I always liked also working in areas that were not black and white, but rather gray. So the Global Development Alliance Office at USAID was really the only team within the government bureaucracy that I felt like I could happily work and make a real difference. There, part of my role was to lead the redesign of the PPP training process within the Foreign Service. And I came across an organization called the Partnering Initiative based in Oxford. So I immediately took their approach and their training around cross-sector collaboration, and I integrated it into the USAID training for all Foreign Service officers. And I adapted some of their approach within the policy, the tools, and the guidance that the agency was using to increase their work with the private sector. So this is kind of where it all came together. And then, the rest is history, as they say.
Fantastic. And I'm sure maybe towards the end of the episode, we will ask you a question about USAID and what happened with the current administration.
Yeah, please.
But you said something, company doing well by doing good, that is an important part. And you, in your work, you have put together two words that sometimes they don't go well together. So, the intersection, private companies, NGO, government, development. So they have been marked with mistrust. The bad guys, the guys that look at profit, and the good guys, the guys the charity guys, the saints. While that one is not really true. We need a blend really to make impact sustainable. So how you have seen this intersection, evolve along this year with USAID and the other organization, and which are also the lessons that you have taken from this?
So great question. Since trust and transparency is really one of the three critical tenets of a successful partnership, which also includes mutual benefit and equity. But trust is the primary reason why partnerships take time and they can't be built overnight. And as we all know, trust is earned as organizations learn to work together. So when I started working within this space around 2008, I felt that there was a really large misconception on what each organization wanted, how they operated, and each was trying to guess the other's hidden agenda. So many of the trainings I led were designed to address and break down these barriers with new skills and tools. And over the decade and a half, I would say, I think these organizations have started to better realize how most of our world's intrinsically complex problems can only be resolved through these multi stakeholder solutions, which require fundamentally different kinds of organizations to bring their own perspectives, resources, and goals to the table. And I believe that most have evolved and are more open now to inviting in and speaking with others to see what possibilities may exist and if they can align around this sweet spot of partnerships. Nowadays, we are seeing many more pre competitive type coalitions or alliances where there are a large number of stakeholders to help diversify the risk and a coordinated actions around a common goal that no one organization could achieve on its own. However, this approach needs to be careful about not having too many cooks in the kitchen. Organizations that are not held to account and feel that they do not have a direct voice or a stake in the partnership will in fact fade away or worse, even derail the partnership, right? So I feel that most signs are trending in the right direction, but there may now need to be a new pivot away from these traditional PPP models to replace much of the public funding that appears to be disappearing. And that could be possibly replaced with these larger private sector investments, working more heavily with philanthropy or other forms of patient capital or impact investment.
And this is, I think, is critical, the conjunction, working together rather than working in silos and separate. And especially this is true in what they are called sometimes emerging markets. And now we call it in the show the future markets, because that is where the future of our planet is to be.
Exactly.
And I can see, in the your background where we are registering, recording this wonderful episode, I can see the Masai beats. I mean, something that unite you with emerging market. You have spent all your life, I mean, or majority of your life in this area. So we'll have the majority of global population in the coming decades, in 10 years' time. So how do you see this future market, and which are the challenges, opportunities that they present? And how also us as organizations, so let's say NGOs or governments or private sector, so they can unlock their potential and finally, make them protagonists of the world stage.
So, well, the biggest immediate challenge I see now is overcoming this development backslide that we are experiencing globally. Although USAID and the US government is only one actor in a complex web of public support, I believe its disappearance is rippling throughout so many emerging markets that the governments, nonprofits, foundations, and businesses even are struggling right now to reset their strategies going forward. So I think at this present moment, each organization needs to first do a risk assessment to see where they are at and where are the most critical areas being impacted and what needs to be addressed first. Second, can these organizations address these needs themselves, or do they need assistance, resources, or expertise from other organizations? Third, do they know who these organizations are or how to engage with them? And finally, do they have the expertise to broker these new relationships in order to move forward? So I don't believe this process has to be an official re-strategizing or a reset of the organizations yet, because I believe you essentially have to stop the patient's bleeding first before you may be able to cure the illness. And by doing this pause and reflect, I believe it's a good starting place to realign their resources right now going forward.
And I think it's very critical, this point, because we are in a changing moment, a changing time. And of course, we need now to re-strategize and work. And I'm sure we are also a critical point when I think also it's time also to change the old paradigm. And we will see a huge leap forward, especially in this area. And one of the area that where I think you have worked a lot, and I think they are critically tackled to be tackled fast, because of course, with a growing population and other, and especially due to the climate change, is food security and climate resilience, because that is what's emerging market and future markets, we call them here, they are really critical. Of course, we have the pyramids growing, population growing. So could you share, because, from the wealth and experience, some highlights from one project or other project that showcase, how the important is food security with climate?
Of course. One partnership model I would like to share was led by my previous organization, Land of Lakes Venture 37, another organization called the Global Dairy Platform, and then a company called Bain and Company, the strategic management firm. And this partnership was called Dairy Nourishes Africa, which was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and coordinated by the Tanzania Agriculture Development Bank, also known as TADB. So our design initially focused on increasing nutrition, on improving agriculture and livestock practices, and supply chain strengthening. Later, the successful model scaled through and further investment from the Swedish Development Agency, also known as SIDA. So the project leveraged this power of public-private partnerships to increase the incomes of small-scale dairy producers in Tanzania. So through our efforts, these producers gained access to formal milk aggregation, processing, and marketing systems while sustainably increasing their on-farm production. The producers also receive access to much-needed inputs and services that will help their businesses thrive, such as cattle vaccines, feed, forage, and genetics. The project also prioritized women's economic empowerment by actively encouraging women's participation in the dairy sector while increasing their access and control over the productive assets. And to a surprise of many, in emerging markets especially, females and women and children are the predominant tenders to the livestock and are responsible for the milk production, right? So as a result of these changes, safe, nutritious dairy products are becoming more widely available in both rural and urban areas throughout Tanzania. Additionally, we tailored marketing and food distribution partnerships, which increased overall consumer awareness of the nutritional value of milk and dairy, and it led to an increased demand as well as further integration of milk into school feeding program. We also integrated regenerative agriculture practices on the farms, supplying the 12 targeted processors with improved intercropping and better forage mix for their animal health, which reduced the methane production. And this was part of the Global Dairy Platform's global initiative around dairy net zero. So finally, as you and I talked even before our interview today, access to finance is always a critical challenge. And in order to address our goals and objectives, Bain and Company provided their expertise on building what we called a capital continuum of finance for these processors, which allowed them to continue to grow and meet their business needs with local commercial banks. So as this project ends, all of these practices will now have been adapted by these farmers supplying milk to the processors, who in turn are now able to ensure the high quality, safe, and efficient production of dairy products.
That is fantastic, Todd. And if I might say, I mean, this project is very dear to my heart because it's exactly, I mean, I didn't know it, but it's exactly what I'm working with my day job and work in the forest area around the Mau forest. So the same three steps, the work with the farmer, regenerative agriculture, aggregation, working with the banks, microfinance. This is a wonderful project. I can say already, I mean, 40% with just practices on more production makes also real impact and real change. So that is a wonderful project. And on that, you have mentioned big names. You have mentioned the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You have mentioned now the Gates Foundation. I mean, if that is the name now, the Bain and Co. So, big names, big names. So you have worked with USA, TechnoServe and others. So you have also put leverage, the philanthropy, but and the private sector. So how you have managed to put these two worlds sometimes at odds together? So can you also give us, apart from the theory, an example on where now you have you have managed to do this connection?
Yes. I learned very quickly that you have to meet the companies where they are at and help them see that joining forces in partnership will not only help them accomplish their goals and deliver on their bottom line, but it can help them do it more cost effectively by bringing other organizations' expertise to the table. So this partnership dance, as I like to call it, attempts to solve a common problem through a systems approach, which provides a much greater chance of long-term sustainability and success for all involved. And once you have these stakeholders speaking the same language and seeing the benefits of this collective action, you can actually shift the conversation from the what to the how. So a great example I'd like to share with you is an organization, an NGO called TechnoServe. And I was working with them in Kenya, where you are based, and it was known as the Agriculture Technology Partnership. So, this pre competitive alliance was designed as a co invested one on one match with USAID to help double the private sector investment and take this concept quickly to scale. So, its aim fundamentally was to improve the performance of Kenya's maize supply chain in the grain basket over 3 years to create a shared value, which included improved livelihoods for 1,800 female and male smallholder farmers, increased access to consumers for these companies that provide inputs critical to improving the productivity of small farms, and improved quality and reliability of maize. So, as core partners, we brought in John Deere and Company, Syngenta Crop Protection AG, and Yara, who are going to provide their deep agriculture expertise and investment to bring targeted smallholders a comprehensive suite of world leading technologies from mechanization and tillage and seeds to crop protection and fertilizer. We then created a second tier of what we called non-core partners, which included Cargill, Seaboard, the East Africa Exchange, and Pan Exchange to participate as off-takers to provide the assurance farmers needed to invest confidently in their inputs and their quality improvements. So meanwhile, as a convener, TechnoServe had three critical roles. First, to build the capacity of an existing infrastructure of 36 identified farmer-owned dairy enterprises that would serve as critical links between the farmers, the input suppliers, and the output markets. Second, to facilitate improved engagement between commercial agriculture market actors and smallholder farmers so that the farmer-owned enterprise is the long-term owner of that commercial relationship. And finally, to assure that a share of the new farmer income was retained by the families to improve the diets and the nutritional outcomes, especially among women of reproductive age and their families. So all in all, this partnership took about 15 months to develop the full concept. And I would like to note that a very interesting lesson I learned in brokering this pre-competitive alliance was to first negotiate with one company, in this case, John Deere, and to have them agree to be the lead sponsor and to financially commit upfront. Then they, instead of the partnership facilitator, which was me on behalf of TechnoServe, essentially dare the others to invest equally in order to secure the same kind of returns. So not wanting to be left out or underspent, all these other companies increase their initial amounts and agrees to the proposed terms on how they could all join into the same partnership, even though some of their product lines competed against one another in the market.
And these are the high impact scale programs that really can, transform food security and war. So a subsequent question on that. So some people, on the audience might say, okay, very nice, they put the names and others, but of course, how you navigate the partnership, and also in very sensitive areas, especially where you talk about, food security, about also local ownerships. You talk about also how to ensure, the bucks goes to the farmers, to the local people. So what challenges have you encountered, because to translate that, and what also the strategy to overcome, those hurdles and to really achieve sustainable result and real impact?
So, Samuel, in my experience, whether it's been working in the Zambia's copper belt or gold mines in Ghana, or even in war-torn Ethiopia, the one constant undermining the progress that I described earlier, and as we noted really in one of your first questions, is this profound absence of trust. But since this can't be rebuilt overnight, I found it really helped to be able to restart dialogues through an unbiased, neutral third party, which in my case, oftentimes was USAID or another international donor, willing to invest in arriving at a common solution for the greater good. Great partnership builders need to bring all key stakeholder voices to the table, especially those of the affected communities, and to let them not only propose, but to own these solutions. These can't be brought in from the outside. But the harder part of this situation is to not have too many participants preventing a common ground from being found. There are oftentimes so many misguided interests that you need to have this neutral third-party broker to help stay the course. And you want to try to keep things as simple as possible. And then once you have that agreement and that convening, you have to design these steps going forward with milestones to be met so that all the stakeholders can see the others investing in good faith, showing their willingness to commit to building back this trust and walking down this path together.
And this is very critical because we know the history of projects, some with maybe good intention and other, maybe some malicious or profiteering intentions of corporations that, really, and you need to ensure the balance, the trust, and also that is the role, I think, personally, of the NGOs, of the civil society world, being local like us or being internationals, that can really bring accountability in these sort of processes, making sure, companies stick to the words and there is a fair share, no, of work. And talking about that, because sometimes one critic of in the NGO world that from companies that I received is also in the academic world. I was trying to remember there was some discussion in the academic world is about really scalability because it's good to have the nice projects. For example, I mean the project that we are having, we are reaching 2, 3,000 farmers. We're doing the wonderful cooperatives. We are exposing like, but how we can reach the millions? How we can get to the scale where we can go from region wide to maybe nationwide or regionally? So scaling localized success, like I would say ours or yours that you have done, is complex. So what are the factors that you can really twist that and ensure scalability of those type of projects?
Samuel, I believe that scaling sustainable agriculture and climate resilient practices isn't just a technical challenge, it's fundamentally a systems challenge. So, from my experience, there are three key factors consistently that determine whether localized success really turns into this broader, lasting impact that you're mentioning. So, first, partnerships must be rooted in this local legitimacy. That means working with the trusted farmer organizations, cooperatives, or these extension systems, not just parachuting in with solutions. Local actors bring this critical context from their indigenous practices to real time climate risks, and they're essential for the adaptation and the feedback loops, right? So, second, we need to align the incentives across the value chain and to balance them out because too often the farmers bear all the risks while others reap the benefits, right? So if we're serious about scaling, we need to involve the buyers, the input providers, and these financial institutions early so we're able to structure these shared value partnerships that de-risk the innovation for the producers. So I've seen this work when private agribusinesses co-invest in this climate smart practices, similar to what I described of Land of Lakes investment with the Gates Foundation in Tanzania. And also when the microfinance or the financial institutions integrate this climate criteria into their lending practices. Third, robust data and evidence are crucial. Scaling requires this proof of both impact and adaptability. So when small pilots generate measurable gains in yield or soil health or income, and when those results are transparently shared, they build a case for this broader policy and donor investment. Scaling can also be accelerated if the original design includes all relevant partners and the vision to scale at the onset, either in size or in geography, rather than having to pivot after your local model has proved a success. So ultimately, I see it's about collaboration with the right actors, structuring the right incentives, and backing it with real time data.
And so critical, and especially like putting together the knowledge, the local knowledge, the capability, the data, the innovation. I mean, working together rather than working in silos and working towards a common objectives. So before we are going to the last part of the podcast, and I would like to ask maybe the future perspective and so maybe some advice. Maybe a question that is overing because you have mentioned so many times USAID, USAID, USAID. So I'm sure some people of the audience, maybe the one based in the US and others, would like to know, or what you can share. We don't want to get in legal trouble, but to say as a former USAID member, how do you see the impact of these choices and this withdrawal, especially from this world of partnership and private sector engagement, especially, and the impact that you have witnessed?
I really believe that fundamentally we're at an inflection point right now. And unfortunately, although the biggest news, especially in my world, has been USAID and the US government, it's really been a trend that has been demonstrated by other international donors as well. So a lot of what you see and hear is this dialogue of if, how, and when philanthropy can start to ramp up or to pivot to help fill these gaping holes. And as they will all attest, all the way from Gates on down, they cannot. Fundamentally, philanthropy has not been set up or built to fill this gap, which is multiple times in magnitude of the amount of money that foundations can even provide. But their systems have been set up to push the envelope in areas that public finance can't go, and where there's very little return. So they still need to double down and pivot from those areas of opportunity, whereas these other areas need to become more creatively addressed. I think in these partnership models, where can private sector better step up? How can more businesses work together rather than working in these silos themselves? What does finance's role from the Development Finance Corporation and the World Bank and other international finance bank, how can they play a more strategic role, not only on the funding and the finance side, but also on the technical assistance provision? But I think fundamentally most important here, Samuel, is helping these emerging market governments now stand up and stand in for where they've been relying and leaning on for the last 60 years of USAID's existence, right? That is no longer the health systems, or whether it's doubling down on rural education or providing healthy meals during lunch to school children. There are so many needs that are conflicting at once that it really is going to require step in our conversation. It's really around agriculture and food systems and food security and around climate change and climate resilience, which are really at the foundation for causing so much problems and challenges on advancing development around the world. What can new creative solutions look like? How can we apply technology in ways that we haven't been able to do in the past, whether it's through AI, whether it's through more streamlines and green supply chains, whether it's companies' real true, environmental, social, and governance goals. I think the consumer and the market is at a point where it's demanding more accountability, sees problems on a global scale, rather than assuming that it, I think, is a pivot, it's a reset, and it's a recognition that we all have a critical role to play in improving our state of affairs and really the harmony between people and planet.
Thank you, Todd. I think you cut a bit when you said, if you can repeat, we are rather the last sentence, please.
Yes, not sure where it exactly cut off, but I said I think it's really fundamental that everybody is realizing, regardless of what organization or entity we sit in, that we all have a part to play and that we need to figure out collectively, how do we come together? How do we have these hard conversations? And how do we set a path going forward to achieve the greatest good for the greatest amount of people?
And I think it was a message of hope, of course, and not of despair. I really like also the stepping up of other organization, the stepping up also the local organization, the local government, the putting together and really craft a new area. I think, as you say, we are a pivotal moment, for this movement. And if you want to to build on that, if you have to look ahead, from all your experience in emerging market and world, so which trends do you see, especially in the food system, the climate season, even within this paradigm of withdrawal of USAID and others? So, and how do you see the areas evolving and the panorama evolving in the next maybe 5 years? Maybe USAID will come back in the next 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. And that might be a hope, and we hope that something it will be most certainly very different. But 5 years is a long window, so we'll see if it can rise to the occasion and really insert itself wherever we find this planet. But basically, the food systems and climate resilience, as I mentioned, they are fundamentally at this inflection point, and history has shown that no individual actors can address these independently. So what excites me most right now is how I have seen cross-sector partnerships continue to shift from transactional to transformational. So we are seeing a movement beyond this short-term CSR or these donor-funded pilots towards deeper, longer-term collaborations that align business models, policy goals, and these community needs that we've been discussing. One emerging trend is the rise of blended finance for food systems transformation, where donors, development banks, and corporations are co-investing and de-risking regenerative practices or these ag tech solutions. This isn't just theoretical anymore. We're seeing platforms like AGRF The Bezos Earth Fund and even the Development Finance Corporation backing integrated investments that bridge productivity, resilience, and livelihoods. And as I mentioned previously, another one is the growing role of climate data and digital platforms to drive smarter partnerships. From satellite imagery to AI powered advisory tools, the ability to tailor climate smart interventions to hyperlocal realities and to measure them in real time is really transforming how partnerships are designed and scaled. And finally, I'm seeing a shift in power dynamics. There's a growing pressure and opportunity to center local food producers and indigenous knowledge in partnership design. And that's not just ethically right, it's practical. The solutions we need are often already being practiced at small scale. And I see the role of partnership is to amplify, finance, and connect these. So, looking forward over the next 5 years, I see more coalitions forming across unusual partners. Agribusinesses working with youth movements, tech companies co creating with local cooperatives, and even governments embedding resilience into trade and procurement. And this change will most likely not be led by international donors, as we've noted, but it needs to be driven by the affected communities upward.
And that is exactly, the direction of localization of aid or work, to get people on the ground. And it's really a challenging path, but also a transformational path. And I'm sure many people of the audience may be the one listening to us from the future market, Kenya and all the other area in the region. Would like to ask you this question. Fantastic. You have done wonderful job. You have a training background. So which advice you offer, the young professional, the people that, as you say, transformational and locally led to build a career in this new world of cross collaboration and partnership?
So first, to understand the basics of effective partnership and cross collaboration by signing up for a foundations course. So many organizations can offer this, but I'm biased having helped develop and deliver so many programs with a partnering initiative. And they offer open class trainings that can include capstone projects, allowing the participants to apply their new skills in a current job and to receive coaching on how to ensure success. So also, depending on your situation, applying for an internship with a local NGO, a project, or even with a larger ag company which is focused on its scope 3 work, who may need boots on the ground. A third, NGOs like TechnoServe offer a fellows program hiring volunteer consultants to head to emerging markets to work on designing and delivering new solutions around ag and climate. Also, just be sure to join in different LinkedIn groups and actively participate in webinars and conferences. And finally, to reach out and follow keynote speakers and authors of some of the new and leading thought pieces in this space. Experts want to ensure that we can pass the torch to new generations to continue this important work. So just a couple ideas there for your listeners.
And fantastic. And also, with our little means and with our little work, also the podcast is trying to bring change makers and people like you to people and spread the message, a message of positivity, a message of change, a message of opportunity, and a message of growth for this area. So thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure hosting you. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your extensive experience and the great examples for your great work. Thank you so much, Todd.
My pleasure. Thanks for the time today.
Fantastic. Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.